They went after Ohtani. Not with words. Not with the kind of passive frustration that circulates through a losing clubhouse in the form of glances and silences and conversations that stop the moment the wrong person walks in. What two demoted pitchers did in that clubhouse went beyond frustration. It went beyond the acceptable boundaries of professional disagreement. It crossed into something that the people who witnessed it have described, carefully and consistently, as dangerous. Two men. One target. And the target was Shohei Ohtani. Before the clubhouse, there was the television. Max Muncy had been asked a straightforward question. The kind of question that sports media asks in the rhythm of a difficult season, about the team's direction, about the decisions being made, about whether the men inside the organization believed in the way things were being run. It was the kind of question that most players answer with the practiced deflection of professional athletes who have learned, through experience, that the camera is never entirely your friend. Muncy did not deflect. He sat with the question for a moment. Long enough that the interviewer had almost moved on. And then he spoke, on live television, with the deliberate slowness of someone who had been holding something for a while and had finally decided that holding it any longer was no longer something he was willing to do. Manager Roberts' decisions are hurting this team. 6 words. Live television. No qualification attached. The room on the other side of the broadcast went very still. To understand what Muncy said, you have to understand what had been building. The Dodgers were not a team in freefall. That distinction matters. They were not a franchise coming apart at its structural foundations, not an organization without talent or direction or the kind of front office intelligence that turns a roster into a championship contender. They were something more complicated than that, a team with enormous capability and a clubhouse that had begun to develop fractures along lines that didn't show up in the standings but that everyone inside the building could feel. The release of Sheehan had sent one message. The release of Hernandez sent another. 2 pitchers gone in the span of days that had already seen 4 lockers emptied and 1 contract terminated. The cumulative weight of those decisions had settled into the clubhouse in the way that accumulated decisions always do, not as a single event, but as a pattern. And patterns, once visible, are very difficult to unsee. Muncy had seen the pattern. And on live television, he had named it. Tucker's situation arrived on top of all of it. The details of what Tucker faced were not fully public by the time the other fires were burning, the nature of the punishment, the specific conduct that had triggered it, the internal deliberations that had produced whatever outcome the organization had decided on. What was public was the fact of it. Another name. Another consequence. Another data point in what was becoming a story not just about individual accountability but about the collective temperature of a clubhouse that was running very hot. Muncy's words on television were already circulating through the building by the time the Tucker situation became known inside the organization. The two things, the public criticism and the internal punishment, arrived in the same compressed window of time, layering on top of each other in the way that bad news in sports sometimes does, as if the calendar had decided that this particular stretch of days was the one where everything that had been avoided would be avoided no longer. The coaching staff heard what Muncy had said. Roberts heard it. The front office heard it. And in the clubhouse, where Sheehan and Hernandez were still processing their own releases, the broadcast was playing. What happened next did not happen in the immediate aftermath of the television segment. It happened later. In the specific hours of a professional sports facility when the public-facing version of the day has ended, when the reporters have filed their stories and the cameras have been packed away and the building belongs only to the people whose names are on the roster and the staff who exist alongside them in the daily architecture of a baseball season. Sheehan and Hernandez were still there. Released players do not vanish from a facility instantly. There are processes. Conversations. The administrative reality of a roster move that takes hours to fully complete. And in those hours, Sheehan and Hernandez had remained inside the building, 2 men who had just been told that their time with the organization was over, who were navigating the specific psychological territory of that knowledge in real time. Ohtani came through. What followed has been described in fragments by the people who witnessed it, some of whom have spoken on condition that their names not be attached to the account, some of whom have said enough that the shape of what happened is clear even if the precise details remain incomplete. The behavior was dangerous. That is the word that has been used, repeatedly and consistently, by the people who saw it. Not aggressive in the generalized sense that sports confrontations sometimes get categorized. Not tense in the way that a heated argument between competitors is tense. Dangerous. The specific word chosen by specific witnesses to describe a specific situation that had moved past the boundaries of what a professional sports environment is designed to contain. Ohtani did not back down. That detail has also been consistent across the accounts that have emerged. Whatever the two released pitchers did in that space, whatever the nature of what they directed at him, Ohtani had not moved away from it. He had stood in it. And the people in the room had understood, in the way you understand things when you see them happen in real time, that what they were witnessing was a moment that would require a response from the organization, a formal, documented, consequential response, before it could be considered closed. Roberts was informed immediately. He did not learn about it from a reporter. He did not learn about it from a clip circulating on social media or from a text message from someone adjacent to the situation. He was told directly, by a staff member who had been in the building, in the specific language of someone who understood that what they were relaying was not the normal content of a difficult day in a baseball season. What Roberts said in that initial moment has not been reported. What he did has. Within the hour, the matter had been escalated to the front office. Within 2 hours, it had moved beyond the standard channels of player discipline and into a category that the Dodgers organization does not use for ordinary roster or conduct decisions. The people with authority over what came next were not the dugout manager or the pitching coach or the player development staff. They were the people at the top of the organization, the ones whose decisions have the longest consequences. The response was still being formalized when the night ended. But everyone inside the building already understood its direction. The press conference the following day had a different quality from the ones that had preceded it. Roberts entered without the measured calm he had carried through the earlier nights, the flat, certain quality of a manager who had already completed his thinking before walking into the room. This time, there was something underneath the composure. Not visible anger. Not the performance of outrage. Something quieter and more durable than either of those things. The look of a man who had managed a baseball team through difficult stretches before, who had made hard decisions and lived with their consequences, and who was now navigating something that existed in a different category from roster moves and tactical disagreements. A reporter referenced Muncy's television comments first. Roberts did not flinch. Max is a competitor. Competitors have strong feelings about how things are going. I understand that. I don't always agree with the forum. But I understand where it comes from. A follow-up, did the criticism sting? Roberts looked at the reporter with the patient steadiness of someone who had been asked variations of this question many times across many years. This job requires you to make decisions that not everyone will agree with. If I needed everyone to agree with every decision, I would have stopped doing this job a long time ago. Then the room shifted to the clubhouse incident. Roberts' voice changed. Not dramatically. Not in the way of a man losing composure. In the way of a man for whom the topic carries a different weight than the ones that preceded it. What happened in that building is not something I'm going to describe in detail here. What I will say is that there are people in this organization whose safety matters. Full stop. There is no version of events in which behavior that threatens that safety is something we move past without consequences that match the seriousness of what occurred. He stopped there. He did not add to it. He did not need to. Muncy, when reached for follow-up comment, said only that his words on television had reflected what he believed to be true and that he stood by them. He did not elaborate on Roberts specifically. He did not walk back the 6 words that had landed in the broadcast and then spread outward into every corner of the conversation about the Dodgers that day. Manager Roberts' decisions are hurting this team. What he had not said, what had remained beneath the surface of the television moment and had still not been fully articulated in public, was what any of this looked like from the inside. From the position of a player who had watched the releases accumulate, who had seen the lockers emptied one by one, who had sat in a clubhouse where the atmosphere had compressed into something that finally broke in a late-night corridor when two released pitchers directed something dangerous at the one person in the organization least deserving of it. That story did not fit into 6 words. It barely fit into the full accounting of every press conference and broadcast and clubhouse fragment that had spilled into public view across the preceding days. The Dodgers issued a formal statement the following morning. It was brief. Institutional. The language of an organization that has decided that the public version of a serious internal matter will be minimal and controlled. It confirmed that the conduct of the 2 released players was being reviewed under the league's conduct protocols. It confirmed that the review would be thorough. It said nothing further. Ohtani was in the facility the next morning before almost anyone else. He took his normal batting practice. He worked through his normal routine. He did not hold a press conference. He did not release a statement. He gave the media, as he had given them in the aftermath of the thrown uniform and the fury in his eyes that night, exactly nothing beyond the image of a man who had shown up to work and intended to keep doing so. Some things in a baseball season announce themselves loudly. Some things make themselves known in the quieter language of a player who arrives early and stays late and does not give the people looking for a reaction the satisfaction of finding one.